So assembling your first CNC can be really overwhelming. I've had 7 CNCs now, and assembling this was still really complicated. So in this video, we'll be covering everything from space, table build, assembly, and everything in between. Let's get right into it. So let's talk about space. That's one of the first things I was looking at because I didn't know how big this machine was. And so to give you some perspective, the room I am in is 11 foot 4 inches wide. So it's about the same size as a single car garage. The table that I currently built it on gives me a nice 6-inch overhang on each side. And this table is 72 inches wide and 65 inches long. And to the top of this plywood right here is 33 inches tall. Now the actual footprint of this machine to the outside of the bracket, is 60 inches. And to this front right here without the Masso on it, this front to the back on the very back side of the motor is 65 inches. And so that's how big the table is, that's how big the frame is, and that's how big the room is to give you some reference so you can kind of judge how big you should make everything. Now let's talk a little bit more about the table build. The way I built this one was just literally from scraps from around the farm. The most important thing when building a table is making sure that this is flat with this. You don't have to have the most sturdiest legs or anything like that. What matters whenever you're installing a CNC like this to a table, is that this mount is securely fastened to this mount and this. So like these two fasteners right here are the most important. You want the tightest bond there. But other than that, it's a really simple table build. Make it simple, make it sturdy, don't make it complicated, but I will say try to make it a little bit oversized. So the last thing I'm going to talk about on the initial setup is utilities. And since each of y'all's situations are going to be uniquely yours, right? Whether you're in a garage, whether you're in an apartment, a couple main things to consider is if you have 220, obviously you're going to need a 220 plug. I would at least have 4 110 outlets and have them on 2 separate breakers. Because whenever you try to plug everything into one breaker, if you have just a normal router on there, plus all this, it's typically going to trip it. And especially if you have your vacuum pump on it. So have at least 4 110 outlets, and then if you have a 220 plug, have a 220 plug in there. Keep it simple, don't overcomplicate it. So for the assembly part, I'm not gonna do a step-by-step guide on how to assemble this whole thing because there are a ton of videos that are a lot better out there giving you a step-by-step guide. I just wanna mention a few things that I did not find in any guides. One, you're probably gonna need 2 people. I tried to do it with one person, smashed my finger a couple times, so my dad had to come and help. Another thing is there's gonna be a ton of cardboard. One of the things I realized about this machine is it is so over packaged, I guess you'd say. Like there's bound to be $500 of packaging just to get this thing to you. Another thing, whenever you're putting this together, is you're gonna need a few tools. You're gonna need a drill, you're probably gonna need impact, and make sure you have a really good Allen wrench set. I spent about an hour and a half of my setup time looking for tools, so make sure you have a Phillips, a square head, all that good stuff. Another thing is I actually put this thing backwards. So whenever you're putting on your gantries and stuff like that, make sure your spot for your limit switch, so make sure this is a little tab right here, and there's your limit switch. That's how you know what's front and back. Now, the very last thing is gonna be motor mounting. Very straightforward. You're gonna have some plugs actually go in this motor right here, so you have to take off this cap, and there's gonna be some plugs there. And I like them to face them forward so I can see the power and the alarm system in the motor. They didn't really show that in a lot of videos, but it mounts on the side. Make sure you have the right motor in the right spot, and you're good to go. So let's go on to the next tip. So as I assemble this, there is a ton of cords hanging everywhere. I mean, this cord is draped here, there's this chaos everywhere, and that's probably gonna be a problem you're gonna run into. So what I did to manage it, I 3D printed these little tabby things right here. If you run a zip tie through, this is a little 4-inch zip tie, and you go around and it actually clips the stuff upwards. And so you notice right here, we use this zip tie to kind of clip everything up. We use a ton of them. I also use this little Velcro thing right here. I'm gonna leave a link in the description. I get them on Amazon. And all it does is just simply go around the cord and Velcro together. And the most practical way of doing this is just get you a bread zip tie, I guess you'd say. Wrap it around a screw, screw the screw to the bottom of the thing, and then you can wrap your cord with this bread twisty, and it'll hold it up just fine, and you're gonna have no problem with cord management then. I did that everywhere, and it greatly helped my cord management. Once again, just a simple little zip tie, simple Velcro piece, or a screw with a bread twisty, and you'll have your cord managed in no time. So once I got my cords under control, and you get your cords under control, you're gonna notice I have these drawers here. I highly recommend making your table for drawers. Reason being is this space is huge, and so if you have any wasted space underneath here, right, if you're working out of your garage or out of your apartment, etc., it's a lot of wasted space. So what these drawers do is allow you to maximize the square footage of this machine. So for me, I'm gonna have one drawer for junk. My second drawer is gonna have my tool set, and one of the things that I like to keep my tools in is like an old tackle box. It's great to store bits in. And my last drawer is just gonna have all my tool holders in it. And then underneath, I made this board right here, and that's gonna hold any kind of drives or any kind of other junk that you have. And this is a solid plate that's mounted all the way to the back. I just screwed it down to the base. That way you can set your VFD or whatever junk you wanna set on it. And then right here, which I haven't shown yet, or I don't even have made yet, is gonna be like a 3-foot wide drawer that pulls out 2 foot because I want to keep all of my scrap wood in there. Now, I'm not gonna put it all the way to the back because at the very back over there is where I'm gonna have my shop vac, which is gonna act as my dust collector for this. And so within this whole table, I have all of my storage, a giant drawer for some materials, and a shop vac in the very back of this. So that's how I maximize the front. That way this whole table space is maximized in every way possible. So now let's go on to the next tip. So my spindle is a water-cooled spindle. So I just have a little tote with some water in it. I don't use antifreeze like most people because I'm in Texas and it's never gonna freeze over here. And I've been doing this for the last 12 years, so it works. So it's just simple water in here in this little black tub. It slides right underneath. I don't have a bucket because buckets are tall and can't slide underneath my table, and it's just something I'm gonna kick and knock over. And back here as well, you can see how I did the cord management on the side, plug it into the table. Now let's go talk about dust collection. So how should you run your dust collection? Well, for me, I'm trying to keep it simple and relative to everybody. I could have this giant dust collector outside and do all that stuff, but for me, I'm just gonna have a shop vac right underneath the table. But if you have space for a dust collector and you can keep it in a separate room or outside so it's quieter, that's a good bet. But for me, all I'm gonna do is just put a shop vac in there, use a plug right here. I'm gonna plug it in and out. I'm not gonna have it hooked up to whenever my spindle starts, the whole thing starts, because I'm gonna be shooting videos in here. But for you, put it on a switch, just plug it in the plug. I mean, you'll know if your dust collector's not on whenever you're running your machine. Stuff will go everywhere. So how we're gonna run the dust hose is just all the way up and over and straight down into our machine. I've seen a lot of people try to overcomplicate this, but don't. Just find the center point of your machine, run that dust collector hose down or vacuum hose down, and it's gonna work great. It's relatively simple. Don't overcomplicate this. Just keep it the KISS method. Keep it simple, stupid. So now let's go take a look at that Masso. So I just wanna briefly touch on a couple buttons that you're gonna need to know. Let's go in and look at a couple of these things. So the first thing you're gonna need to know how to do is go to F3, which is jogging and probing, and you're gonna need to know the difference between continuous and step mode. Continuous means that you can just move around the CNC continuously. Step mode means that incrementally moves one tap at a time. And you're probably only gonna use that when you're setting the height of your bit. And the continuous mode is what you're most likely gonna use. And it is nice, it has this little feed rate adjuster right here, which is super nice. But if you can just move it around there, don't worry about all this keyboard stuff, don't worry about everything else. If you can just move it around, you're already halfway there. The other spot you're gonna live is this load file. That's where you're gonna take the thing that you wanna do and you're gonna load it. It's pretty simple. That's it, right? And the last thing is this F2 Program MDI. This is where you click go. That's it. So you pretty much need to know F2, where you click go, F3, how you move the machine, and F6, how you load the file. That's it. Don't overcomplicate it. And super user-friendly once you get the hang of it. Just don't get overwhelmed once you see this thing. So let's talk about the spoil board. We're gonna talk about how to position it, how to install it, and a pro tip at the end that's really gonna help you out. Now, this is the most daunting, heart-grabbing, gut-wrenching thing out of this whole process, because you have this whole thing, you took a day, you put it all together, and then all you see is this flat table. And you're like, where do I start? Like, where do I put my material at? Where's the corner? And so to simplify this, let me show you how to position it first. And what I did is I put a V-bit in this spindle, and I put it in the very, very front corner, and I maxed it out in every direction. So I went as far as you can that way, that way, that way, and that way. And I made sure that V-bit was cutting the table a little bit. And what that did is gave me the frame of how big this CNC can cut. So now I have the exact square of the maximum cutting capacity of this machine. So now what that gives you is a perfect square. You have your straight edges, and then you can line up your rails to that. So whether you want to oversize your MDF, you can do that, whether you want to undersize it, etc. What I did is I put the edge of the rail and that line right on each other. So the line is cut right here, right there, and I put the edge of the rail right on that line. So this very front corner of this MDF right here is my farthest the machine will go up and over. So this is my very, very front homing origin of the machine. And so everything off of that works this way. Now, people like to overcomplicate this install process and having, this MDF notched out and doing all kind of crazy clamping and all this kind of fixtures and whatnot. I don't see the use for that. Maybe it helps, but I've gotten by. I did over $1 million of product on a table that looks just like this, and so I don't think you have to overcomplicate it. Just put some T-slots and stuff like that. Now, there is a huge pro tip that I do want to mention in this T-slot table, and we just now did it on this one, but it's going to save a world of time. And what that pro tip is to cut out or grind out a little spot on that T-slot so your bolts can go in there and fit. Because if not, you're going to have to reach all the way to the back whenever you need to insert a T-slot from the back. And if you're like me, it hurts your stomach. So don't do that. Just do it about halfway and put that T-slot, and that way you can go in and out with your MDF. Another thing to note while you're installing this is fly cutting and surfacing. So it is so important that after you get this MDF installed, you fly cut it. Because if you don't fly cut it, imagine if your table's wavy like this, right? And you mount your MDF on it, and now the whole thing is wavy. Well, this machine, doesn't know if it's wavy or not. So what you want to do is you want to put your fly cutter in there and just take off like a 30-second off the top, and that's going to level the top of the spoil board with the machine. That way, whenever you do this giant V-carve or this giant engraving, it's perfect over here and it's perfect over there. If you don't do that, you're going to have low spots and high spots, and it's just not going to work. So always, always, always fly cut your MDF so you get it zeroed out with the machine and everything's flat and level. So guys, I hope that pro tip helped. Remember, we are launching CIC Academy whenever we hit 100,000 subs, so don't forget to like and subscribe. And remember guys, if you ain't cutting it close, you ain't cutting it right.